everyone, I'm Miss Killian, and this is Lesson 10, Part 1. Do you have the materials you need for our lesson today? You need your journal and something to write with. You also could have a copy of the text, We Are the Ship. If you need to, pause the screen now to get your materials. Let's begin by finding a clean page in your journal and creating an I Notice, I Wonder chart. This will be just like the chart that you created for our 6th inning lesson. If you want, you can put 7th inning right up top. Pause the screen to create that chart now. So we are going to start today with looking at some illustrations from 7th inning. Take a moment and look at all 3 and notice and wonder on your chart that you just created. We're going to come to talk about these images in a little bit. Pause the screen and record your noticings and wonderings. If you're working with someone else, you can share what you noticed and what you wondered with them now. In our previous lesson, we began to explore the treatment of the players. And we talked about the treatment specifically in Latin America. We're going to read today's content framing question together. Read it with me. What does a deeper exploration of Negro League players' treatment reveal in 7th inning of We Are the Ship? We're going to continue understanding and learning about the treatment of the players as we study this throughout Chapter 7. We're going to read, we're going to notice, and we're going to wonder. Let's dive into Chapter 7. Today, as we read Chapter 7, titled Good Exhibitions, Negro Leagues versus the White Leagues, we're going to first predict what we think it's going to be about. Here's the quotation for 7th inning. It's on the screen. When we played head-to-head, it was nip and tuck. They won some and we won some. Gene Benson, outfielder, Philadelphia Stars, quoted in We Are the Ship, page 57. In other words, when Negro League teams played head-to-head or against white teams, they were very, very close games, what they called nip or tuck, as Benson says. Another word that is in the title that I want to make sure you understand is exhibition. Have you heard of that word before? Read the definition of exhibition silently, and then we'll talk about it together. Exhibition, it's a noun. An exhibition game, or in the case of 7th inning, a friendly game between the Negro Leagues and the White Leagues. What I want you to do is I want you to get your vocabulary journals out, wherever you're recording the vocabulary for this module, and write the definition of exhibition. That's going to come up a lot in our discussion today. Pause the screen to record that definition now. Did you get it recorded? Okay. So another word you're going to hear in this chapter is barnstorming. We started talking about barnstorming when we read earlier chapters, but I want to make sure you know what it means. So to make extra money, many of the Negro League team players, as well as some of the white and Latino teams too, traveled around during their off season, playing exhibition games. These barnstorming tours were particularly important because they earned extra money for the players and fans really loved them. Okay, so those are 2 words that we're going to hear together today. So let's revisit these illustrations that we looked at in our welcome a few moments ago. Look again at these images, and this time think, what do you predict 7th inning may be about based on the illustrations as well as that chapter title, Good Exhibitions, Negro Leagues versus the White Leagues? Pause the screen now to think about that question. If you're working with someone else, you can share your response now. We'll see if your predictions are right as we read 7th inning. We are going to return to our Notice and Wonder T-charts, the new ones we made for 7th inning. And throughout our reading today, whether you're reading with me or you're reading independently, I want you to record your noticings and wonderings, and specifically those noticings and wonderings that have to do with the treatment of the Negro League team players. Okay, so think about it now. What's your reading task? Okay, you are going to record about the treatment of Negro League players, all your noticings and wonderings. I'm going to put the text and the illustrations on the screen as I read aloud. Make sure your paper is all ready. 7th inning, good exhibition. The Negro Leagues versus the White Leagues. When we played head-to-head, it was nip and tuck. They won some and we won some. Gene Benson, outfielder for the Philadelphia Stars. Our season started in the spring and ended in September. We played more than 100 games a season and then played winter ball in Cuba or Mexico. In between, we traveled all over the country, playing all kinds of teams: black, white, Latin, pro, and semi-pro. Some Negro Leaguers even barnstormed in Canada and Asia. There's that word that we talked about, barnstormed. So they barnstormed in Canada and Asia. But most games were played in the United States. In many places, we wouldn't see a black face for miles around. The home team would supply the umpires, usually the town sheriff or somebody like that. The winner would get 60% of the gate and the loser 40%. The gate means that's how many people come through. So the amount of people that came through the gate to enter and watch the game. If we tried to, we'd split it even down the middle. They did their best to keep us from winning, sometimes dragging the game out until it was too dark to play to force a tie. We had more ties than anything. We could have beaten most of those teams with our hands behind our backs, but we would get robbed. The umpires would call us out when we were safe, and everything was a strike, no matter where it was pitched. You'd have thought all of their pitchers were named Satchel Paige. We had to learn to hit bad pitches. The Brooklyn Bushwicks used to freeze the balls before the game. Took the life out of them. When we hit them, they wouldn't go very far. Sometimes we would get them, too. There was a catcher, Chappie Gray, who used to catch Satchel when he was in his prime. One time, they were playing in Enid, Oklahoma. By the time the game got up into late innings, it started to get kind of dark. So Chappie told Satchel, "Hey, Satchel, you got 2 strikes on this hitter. Man, you throwing the ball so hard, I can't see it too well, and I don't want to break my finger. I'll tell you what you do. You wind up like you are going to throw the ball, and I'll hit my fist in my mitt. Make it sound like it's the ball." "Man, nobody'll know the difference," he told Satchel. "You don't want to hit one of these white guys, man, or we're going to have to leave here running. They'll hang us down here," Satchel said. "Okay, I'll do that." So he went back out there, and he wound up and came down with that long stride. Big follow-through. Chappie hit his fist into the mitt, and the umpire yelled, "Strike 3!" That hitter was so mad, he threw his bat down. He yelled at the umpire, "You blind, Tom!" Anybody who could see knows that ball was high and outside. Those little white towns in the South were rough. The fans would call you everything. One lady brought us a black cake, had it delivered by a man in a white coat, written with icing from the top corner to the bottom corner at an angle. She spelled NOW I, G, etc. Now, why would somebody go through the trouble to do something like that? I guess you could call that dedication. Kids in those towns didn't know any better. They'd call you the N-word before they'd say colored people because it was easier. And we couldn't talk back, fight back, or even run the score up too high. They might chase us out of there, and we wouldn't get paid. It wasn't big money, but we needed it. You couldn't change these folks' minds anyhow. We were just a bunch of ball players. They were long set in their ways. What I want you to do now is I want you to stop, and I want you to record your noticings and wonderings on your T-chart. I notice, I wonder. As you record yours, I'm also going to be thinking about my noticings and wonderings that I'm going to record on my T-chart. So I'm going to ask you to pause the screen now and record your noticings and wonderings. I'm going to record mine as well. Did you get your noticings and wonderings? Here's one of my noticings and wonderings. I noticed in this paragraph that all of the Negro ball players, the Negro League ball players, weren't treated very well in the South. I wonder if any of the White League ball players stood up for those Negro League players. Did you have a wondering like that? We're going to keep reading. We are on the paragraph that begins with "There were white teams." Okay, so I'm going to zoom into that paragraph so that you can see our text. There were white teams who traveled just as much as we did. Life on the road was rough, but wasn't as bad for them because they could stay where they played and didn't have trouble finding a meal. House of David was one of those teams. We played them quite often. They were a good ball team. They were from a religious colony out in Benton Harbor, Michigan, wore long hair and beards. The major leagues frowned on facial hair back then. There were a couple of knockoff House of David teams too. Sometimes they would hire major leaguers to play for them in the off-season. They would wear false beards when they played, but they weren't fooling anybody. Even old Satchel pitched a few innings for the colored House of David. We played major leaguers quite often. When their season ended in October, they would barnstorm against us in California and sometimes in Cuba. We played everybody from Ty Cobb to Babe Ruth. We won about 60% of the game. We hit them just the same as we hit our own pitchers. And they would just as much trouble hitting Satchel as we did. That's how we knew we were good enough to play in the major leagues. There was never any problem on the field. We were friends with those guys. If there was a guy who didn't want to be bothered with us, then he just wouldn't play. The guys on the other team would come over after the game and tell us how good we were. Man, if we had a nickel every time he heard, if you were white, you'd be worth such and such. We'd all be rich men. They knew we were just as good as they were. They respected us, and we respected them. A ball player is a ball player, and good ball players are always up for a good game, and we'd give it to them. Besides, they made some good money playing against us. Back then, major leaguers didn't make all the money that they make today. In the off-season, they had to find a way to make a living. Pause the screen, record your noticings and wonderings, and I'm going to do the same. My noticings and wonderings are on the screen. I noticed that the Negro League players and the white players got along on the field and that they respected one another. I took that from the bottom of page 58. That made me wonder if maybe they changed someone's opinion about the treatment of the Negro League players. Or no, let's read on and maybe we'll learn more about that. I'm going to put up on the screen pages 60 and 61. This illustration is captioned J. Hannah Dizzy Dean and Satchel Paige. Let's read from the top of page 60, still thinking about our question and noticing and wondering. We had a good thing going, playing in the major leagues in the off-season, until Stan Musial, the St. Louis Cardinal slugger, put an end to it unintentionally. This word unintentionally means he didn't do it on purpose. He was supposed to play with the Cleveland Indians pitching great, Bob Feller, on an all-star barnstorming team out in California, only Musial started late because the Cardinals were in the World Series. That year, the series went 7 games, and by the time Musial made it out to California, the Pacific Coast League had already started up. By the end of the season, he realized how much money he could have made had he been there the whole time, much more than he made in the World Series. He told people about it when he got home, and when Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, the commissioner of the Major League Baseball, who was dead set against integration, caught wind of it, he made a rule that banned all major leaguers from barnstorming until the World Series was over. That Landis tried everything to stop those major leaguers from playing us. We were winning too many games, and he broke the whole thing up, said something about the major league getting a black eye when we beat them. He cut back the number of games they could play us and told them they couldn't wear their major league team uniforms. They had to call themselves all-stars and play down our games as mere exhibitions. Pause the screen and record noticings and wonderings. I will do the same. Did you get your noticings and wonderings? Great, I got mine and I'll share it with you at the end. We're going to continue reading from the paragraph that begins with Satchel Paige put. Satchel Paige put together an all-star team and played major league pitchers Bob Feller's and J. Hannah Dizzy Dean's all-star teams. When people heard that Satchel Paige was going to be pitching against Dizzy Dean or Bob Feller, they would come. Like we used to say, 2 to a mule. One year, Diz and Satch filled Yankee Stadium for one of those exhibition games. They charged full price and made a killing. Sometimes Satchel was throwing so hard he wouldn't let their batters even touch the ball with the bat. And Feller and Dean, those boys could bring it too. As far as competition, I'd have to say we were about even. Only thing different was that they were a little more polished than we were, and those major league teams had deeper benches than we did. Negro League teams would only carry about 15 to 19 players at most, with about 6 pitchers, 2 good and the rest mediocre, and 1 good catcher. The majors would carry about 25 players, 6 or 7 good pitchers, and 2 good catchers. If we got hurt, well then, we just had to play hurt because there wasn't anyone coming in for us. We used to say we were paid for 9 innings, so we played for 9. But even with all that, we still won baseball games. I guess we beat those major leaguers as often as we did because we could outthink them. Baseball is a game of intelligence. For a long time, a lot of people thought Negroes could never play Major League Ball because they thought we weren't smart enough. It took them a long time to realize that nothing was further from the truth. Those major leaguers learned a lot by playing us, and we learned a lot by playing them. They learned we were men just as they were. And they would shake our hands and look us in the eye after we beat them, as did we. Maybe we did help change a few minds playing baseball after all. Pause the screen and record any last noticings and wonderings. You will find my noticings and wonderings as I read 7th inning. I want you to return to your noticings and wonderings and look them over. Think about, did you notice the treatment of Negro League players throughout the 7th inning? Do that now. Pause the screen and look at your noticings and wonderings. The 2 noticings and wonderings that I added that we haven't talked about yet are on the screen. I added this one. I noticed that the commissioner of baseball, he did not like the idea of the white team members playing against the Negro Leagues. I wonder if he worried that the Negro League teams would be better than the Major League teams and make them look bad. I also noticed that the Major League teams seem to have more players and resources than the Negro League teams. Yet, the Negro League teams were just as good as the white Major League teams. I wonder if the Major League coaches and umpires noticed this talent of the Negro League players. What were your noticings and wonderings? If working with someone, you can share those now. On the screen, I have page 58. I've underlined a quotation from page 58 that can also be found on the white sticky note. Listen as I read this quotation. You couldn't change those folks' minds anyhow. We were just a bunch of ball players. They were long set in their ways. Nelson, page 58. Take a moment to reread that quotation on your own again. And I want you to think about, what does the narrator mean? Pause the screen now, reread that quotation, and think about that question. If working with someone else, share your response now. The speaker feels that he and his teammates were unable to influence white Southerners' racial prejudices. They didn't feel that they had the power to change people's views and make them see African Americans as equals. Southerners were long set in their ways, it says. This is because of those segregation laws that we spoke about earlier in this arc. Let's look at another question, and we'll stay on page 58 for that question and dive into this idea a little bit. On the screen now, and we're going to stay on page 58 to answer it. Read the question as I read it aloud. According to the narrator, which group of people most respected Negro League players? Do you think that it's the first choice, white fans from Southern towns, or the second choice, the commissioner, Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis, or the third choice, the white Major League Baseball players? You can look back at the text on page 58 if you have the text, or on the text on the screen to help you draw your conclusion. Do that now. Did you say 1, 2, or 3? I'm going to say get ready, and I want you to show. Get ready. All right, did you choose 3? The white Major League Baseball players? Let's dive in a little bit more to support this answer with text evidence. So let's revisit on our screen where we can find that evidence. Here's the evidence I found. The guys on the other team would come over after the game and tell us how good we were. I also found this quotation. If you were white, you'd be worth such and such. I think that's evidence that supports that the white Major League Baseball players were the people who most respected the Negro League players. It also says they respected us and we respected them. Nice work on that one. We're going to dive into the text on page 60 now to see if we can find more evidence to support this conclusion. If you have your text, turn to page 60. If not, I'm going to put page 60 on the screen for us to use. Okay, we're on page 60. I want you to reread the last 2 paragraphs on this page and think if you can find evidence to support that the white Major League Baseball players were the group of people that would have most respected the Negro League players. Do that now. Did you find evidence? Let's identify that evidence together. It says in the last paragraph on page 60, those Major Leaguers learned a lot by playing us, and we learned a lot by playing them. That shows that they were learning and had a mutual respect for one another. Nice work finding evidence to support your answer. We're going to stay in this last paragraph on page 60, and we're going to dive into this sentence a little more. I'm going to underline the sentence I want you to reread. On your own, reread, I'm going to zoom in, reread that sentence. You can do that now. Did you reread it? What did Nelson mean when he says that the Negro League players did help change a few minds by playing baseball after all? I want you to pause the screen, open to a clean page in your notebook, and do a quick write to answer that question. What does he mean when he says that? Answer that question now. Baseball provided white players and black players the opportunity to be together, to learn from one another. This may have opened the door for an opportunity to change people's minds about race. We're going to talk more about this as we continue our lesson and as we go into our next lesson. We're going to end our lesson today with a quick write, and we're going to answer this question. How did playing against white Major League teams help Negro League players change a few minds? You're going to use the text to help you answer this question. You also should take into consideration everything we talked about on page 58 and page 60. All right, pause the screen and answer this question in your journals now. In our next lesson, we will continue to study this question. If you have any questions, reach out to us at info@greatminds.org. And thank you for learning with me today. I look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day.